John, let's talk gear.
All right.
This becomes we're getting down to the nitty gritty, as it
Sure.
were. So, early footage of the Desert Rose Band has you playing I think we talked about it was a Japanese vintage 62 reissue, custom, sunburst with white binding that you
Yep.
played for a while. And then you started playing an ASAT that was natural finish that's now in the possession of Brad Paisley
Right. You set up that transfer.
I
was
set
very
that
nice.
up and that's kind of a fun. Should we tell that story real quick?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah. I'd love to hear from your perspective how it happened.
So Brad Paisley and I went to college together, and we used to sit around and we each had videotapes of you playing with the Desert Rose Band. Okay.
Okay.
So we each had the stuff that we had taped off the television. And so we would scrape up enough money to pick up a one-topping Papa John's pizza. Okay.
Only one top.
Yeah, only one. That's all we could afford because so we'd scrape together dollar bills and change and stuff because I think it was $6.50 to pick up a one-topping pizza at this time in the early '90s, and so we would get a one-topping large pepperoni pizza, and we would put in our tapes of you playing with the Desert Rose Band. And so we had things like Church Street Station and Austin City Limits and different performances on Nashville Now and various other things. And so one of our favorites was of course we liked the Church Street Station one a lot, but we also really liked the Austin City Limits one, that seemed to be during the time of the tail end of the first record or beginning of the second album, something around that.
Yeah, and because there was material from both albums, but it was early on.
Yeah,
of the live, days of that band.
And you had two AC30s, and you had one of these pedal boards, and you had this natural finish ASAT. And so fast forward many years, and there's a gal named Cindy Mabe that I'd gone to school with, and she was working at Arista, and she called me up and she said, every time we do a platinum award ceremony or something like that for Brad, we give him the plaque, and he puts it against the wall somewhere and leaves it there. He won't take the award home.
Think about that. Every time we do the platinum thing,
exactly.
It's happened so many times.
And this was,
it's pretty impressive.
Yes. So his career was chugging along pretty well.
Doing very well.
Yeah. And she asked me, she said, what is something that Brad would really like? We just want to do something nice for him. And so, I had met you a couple months before, and I said, why don't you contact John Jorgenson and see if he would, in some way part with this guitar that he used? Because I knew you would never part with your Silver Sparkle or something like that. But I thought perhaps, here's a guitar that you used on this performance that I hadn't seen you play since. I thought maybe he'd part with it. So they did. So they reached out to you. And so there was this party that was on the stage of the Ryman. And you, were kind enough to show up. And you had on your Vox grill cloth jacket.
That I could still fit into, thankfully.
Yeah. And, looked like you were ready to, play, ready to come out and rock out. And you had that guitar, and your wife Dixie was with you.
Yep.
And so I kind of had you backstage, and Joe Galati, gave this great presentation, and of course they gave him a plaque, with the platinum album thing, and then they said, but we have someone, a special guest that's going to come out, and you come walking out with the Vox grill cloth jacket and holding the natural finish G&L ASAT from the Austin City Limits performance.
Yeah, and the look on his face, that was pretty priceless. I would love to see a little clip. Maybe there is a clip of that. You could find it somewhere.
I've never seen him that awestruck before. I mean, because he was just completely. He didn't know what to say. And there's I have a picture, and you can even tell in the picture that he's still kind of like in a dream or something.
Well, it's so cool. I really thank you for making that happen, because from my perspective, I got an email, I think, from Cindy saying we'd like to do something nice for Brad, and his tech, Zach had mentioned, that he would love to have one of your ASATs from your Desert Rose Band days.
Yes.
And she was no more specific than that.
Yeah.
And I thought, okay, well, I didn't have that many actually. Well, I mean, I have. All of us have way too many guitars, but
Right.
it wasn't like a ton of different ASATs. So there's this one that I played so much of that time period on, and a lot of the Telecasters things on, and then I had one that had been made up special. It had a humbucking pickup in the front of theirs, and a Strat pickup in the middle, and this ASAT pickup in the back.
Okay.
And it was also natural. But I used that on Bonnie Raitt's Nick of Time album.
Okay.
It's a very creamy, the neck pickup was really creamy. So that's a special one.
Yeah.
And then I had one that I got later. It was a black one. I had broken my arm. It was the first time I was going to play with Elton. And I couldn't move my arm away from my body. So I had the guitar cut off like that so that I could fit. Yeah. So I still have that one, and I have the piece left.
Okay.
And then there was one 3 pickup ASAT, blonde, that I used on I Still Believe in You Now. Mm-hmm. And I think I sort of did a long-term trade loan with a friend for a keyboard or something.
Yeah.
But then there was this other one that was actually the first ASAT that I ever had. And I thought, well, that one, yeah, I could part with that one, And at the time, I didn't remember anything about Austin City Limits. That wasn't even in my mind. It was just like, oh, yeah, this is a nice ASAT.
Yeah.
And it's kind of cool because it was the first one that was given to me by Leo Fender.
Yeah.
So that in itself is just pretty awesome.
I mean, that's totally all.
And it had a really pretty grain pattern on it too. Very like book matched grain pattern in the wood. And so when I thought, well, if I'm going to be there to present it, he would think it was cool if I wore the Vox jacket because it's, there's not that many people that get that.
Yeah.
A lot of people just look at it like, oh, they don't even know what it is.
Yeah.
He's going to know, boom, in a second what that is. And so when I saw you backstage waiting to make the presentation, you came right and looked at the guitar and went, that's the one you used on Austin City Limits. I went, oh, you're right. I hadn't even thought of that before.
Yeah.
And that's really, it actually is one of the best kind of, I don't know, time capsule of the Desert Rose Band at that time.
Yeah.
We didn't even all have Manuel suits yet. Mm-hmm. It was early on. So you're talking about, we weren't making money.
Yeah.
And those suits were expensive.
Yeah.
So, and I think it was probably my first 2 AC30s, I think.
Yeah.
One was my first top boost AC30 in a sort of a charcoal gray cover, and the other one was a white one. And I'd had that cabinet built because when I bought the amp, I bought it out of the newspaper, and it just said AC30 head only,
Yeah.
And I thought, well, I went to see it, and someone had taken all the Tolex off the cabinet, cut holes in the side for handles, taken the front panel off. It had no back panel. So it was just like this sort of skeleton thing.
Yeah.
But I said, hey, I'll buy this, first of all. Mm-hmm. But do you have the speakers for it too? He said, yeah, I guess, I'd sell those. And so I had the whole thing, but the cabinet was just like in tatters. So a friend of mine, Doug Johnson, replicated my cabinet, and I had it covered in white. So I had the black and white amps there. Anyway, Austin City Limits.
So you moved from the Fender, the Japanese vintage Tele-Custom, and then you started playing the ASAT, and then so was this the next one that you got?
Yeah. This is the one that I really wanted. I wanted Silver Sparkle. When I first got it, it was all this color here. This gold color, it's just the lacquer yellowed to create that color. And when I asked I asked them at G&L, could you make me a silver sparkle?
Yeah.
And Dale Hyatt was the product manager at the time, and he said, no, we're not going to do that. I said, come on, please, I really want it. And he said, no. He said, back in Fender, when we would make a sparkle finish like that,
Yeah.
one little metal flake would get stuck in the ducting, and then it would drift down in the middle of a black finish and ruin it. You know? So I just kept begging, and finally they did this guitar for me. And I don't even know who did the finish. It's very, very thick, and it has, if you can see, it's cracked all along here. You know, in some very cold weather, but I actually kind of love how it looks now, and it's a great sounding guitar. You know, here I used to use it definitely for She Don't Love Nobody, and it's got that clangy sound.
Yeah.
It's going to be very loud, so we won't talk and play at the same time. So you hear it's got a lot of chime, and it's got a telly sound, but it's a little bit more. It's a little girthier, and it'll drive the amp just a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How much do you think that has to do? You know, because of course the strings don't go through the body on that. It's got a top loading bridge.
It does have a top loading bridge, but if you took this bridge off, there's a route in the body about the size of a small Strat pickup.
Okay.
And this bridge has a metal piece that goes in the body.
Oh, wow.
So you do get some of the properties of string through body like on a regular telly.
Wow.
And this bridge is very, how should we say, it's a very solid bridge.
Has a lot of mass to it.
It has a lot of mass. And if you see here on the side, unless we get really geeky here, there's a little screw, a set screw.
Right.
That pushes all of these bridge pieces together. So you get this big mass of metal, almost like a Les Paul Junior bridge, which is another one of my favorite type of guitars. And, the regular Telecaster bridge, where everything is very, there's a lot of contact points. And I think that contributes to the harmonic content and the sustain of the guitar for sure. We just heard the back pickup of this guitar, which the back bridge pickup, I would say. Yeah. And it has... it has a bristly kind of sound. The front or neck pickup has a creamier sound, a little bit fatter than a normal telly. And let's see, I'm going to change the setting on here. Yeah. There's a delay. And this is something that I would have played on the Helicasters, the second album, Return of the Helicasters, and would be this kind of a... There's a lot of harmonic content in that. That's the middle position with a Dimension C pedal on, which is sort of a chorus flanger spatial enhancer, they say. It's an analog pedal. And they made also a digital Dimension C, which has 4 knobs.
Right.
It doesn't sound like this.
Yeah. Which of the 4 buttons is pushed? I can't tell.
The first one.
Okay.
The first one.
Yeah.
And I almost always leave it like that.
Okay.
Every once in a while, for fun, I might go to 4 if I wanted to get really wild sounding. But that's for special occasions.
Yeah. And then otherwise, you've got this Boss DD3, and you've got a RV2. That's the first of their digital reverb pedals, and it looks like you've got it on the plate setting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is an RV2. I seem to like things that end in 2. Normally, if I had my choice, it would be a DD2 instead of a 3.
Yeah.
I have 4 or 5 different pedal boards, and most of them it's going to be the 2 on there. I'm not sure why. I'm just used to where the knobs go on that one. Yeah. I think the the amount of decay that you can get is different, or some of the timing is a little bit different.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's pretty much the same pedal, but it's a DC2, the Dimension Chorus. It's an RV2,
Yeah.
and normally it would be a DD2.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's just whoever was in the 2 design phase is the ones that I like.
Yeah.
But
No,
if I turn off those and just have the reverb, so you get a big sound. It's a little bit stadium sounding, but without being too swampy. And so that's just the reverb by itself. If I add the delay in, you can hear the delay in kind of a medium. And I would usually, the way that I used to set that delay, I would play this song. And if I heard that the 8th note delay coming in the right place,
Right.
I knew I had the time setting right.
Right.
So that's a song from the first Desert Rosewood album, the one that got away.
Yeah.
And we didn't ever play that live too much. I don't know why, but it's one of my favorite tracks that we did. I use the Dimension C a lot, for clean sounds. For example, on Love Reunited. I'll probably have that delay on as well. Yeah, it doesn't want to stay on, does it?
Again, that kind of country meets Pretenders. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I was going towards a Telecasters thing before to show the neck pickup. After that intro, the song is called Between Twilight and Dawn, and the melody would have been played on this guitar. It's very nice, fat sound,
And still clear, though.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't get too muddy.
Yeah.
So this was a great versatile guitar for me for a lot of those days. It also sounds good with some distortion as well. That pedal. Yeah, and see, it just turned off the reverb. So my favorite... So I was telling you about an amp that I had, the first single 12 Matchless. I stupidly left it in my car at one point with my pedal board, and the whole car was stolen.
Oh.
So I got the car back, but it didn't have any tires or wheels or steering wheel or seats or sunroof, or it was basically stripped.
Wow.
But it still worked.
Yeah.
They said, we found your car, but if you want to drive it, you'll have to bring something to sit on and a steering wheel.
Yeah.
So I got it back and eventually built it back up again. But I never got the amp back or the pedal board.
Yeah.
The amp, we think it ended up in Canada.
Okay.
So there was letters to Matchless asking about a problem or something. And Mark Sampson at the time said, send it back, we'll fix it free. Of course, they never did.
Right.
But my pedal board at that time, I had a TS9 Tube Screamer, which was the one that you could get at that time.
Right.
But when I went to replace it, the only one they had was this kind, the TS5 Sound Tank. And I thought, that looks so stupid.
Yeah, the little
I
black
hate that thing.
looking thing.
Yeah, I don't want that. So, but that's the only one that we have.
Yeah.
It's okay. Well, I'll take it.
Yeah.
Well, it has ended up being my favorite tube screamer of all of them.
I remember those being $35 or something like that on
You
sale.
can still now get them for $35 on eBay.
Wow.
Next to it is the TS-808, which of course is a very expensive, desirable pedal. But I only use that if I want to put them both on at the same time.
Wow.
So just for normal stuff, I always use this tube screamer, distortion all the way, tone middle, level, slightly less than middle. Okay. So the volume is about the same with or without it. So here's without it. Volume is about the same. So a great sounding pedal.
Yeah.
That's what I would use. All Telecaster stuff. It's to this day. That's my go-to distortion sound.
And how would you use the two together?
I would not so much on this guitar, but on the one that I described, the Telecaster model, if I want to get feedback. But who knows? Maybe it might work on this one.
So you're using a $700 vintage overdrive pedal to create feedback.
Exactly.
Yeah. And you're using the $35 one as your main overdrive.
Yeah. And, it's not that the 808s, it doesn't sound bad. It sounds nice. But I find that in a band situation, the 808 is smoother and it doesn't cut through as well. Yeah. So when you turn it on, it's a little bit, even if you turn it up, it just doesn't have quite the bite. So and as I say, I'll turn it on if I want a smoother, almost more like a LA studio, smoother kind of distortion.
Yeah.
Which I most of the time don't want. But
yeah. So John, another one of the sounds that, with the Desert Rose Band that you kind of brought back was, that kind of British invasion and bird, sound of the electric 12-string. So.
No, I was such a big fan of the Birds, and also when George Harrison would use the Rickenbacker as well. And in my earlier band in Neo Paris and the Futures, that was my setup. I think I said was a Les Paul Jr. with P90 and an AC30, and I had a Rickenbacker 12-string as well. It was called a 425-12.
Okay. Solid
body. When I got it, the neck had been broken off the body and badly repaired, so it was kind of like a whammy bar. Mm-hmm. And I sent it to Rickenbacker, and instead of fixing that joint, they put a new neck and body on it and put my old parts on it.
Oh.
So that's what I used on the first Desert Rose Band album.
Okay.
And then I started wanting the sound of a middle position pickup as well. So for the second album, I had asked Rickenbacker to build me this guitar. And they balked at first, and then one of my friends said, "Hey, I think this band is really doing well. Maybe you should reconsider." Yeah. So what I wanted was what this came out to be. It's I always loved how John Lennon's Rickenbacker looked.
Right.
And so this has the same type of body, same kind of pickups, 3 pickup setup, and this early kind of knob stacked pick guard like the 50s Rickies. But this has a full-scale 12-string neck. Mm-hmm. John Lennon's guitar had a short-scale neck.
Right.
And they built him a 12-string with a short scale as well. But this is full-scale neck, but with the cool pickups and everything like that. So this I used on Summer Wind and on Running, and everything basically on the Running album. And I was talking about the Dimension C earlier before. It's not going to be in stereo, but you'll still get the kind of effect that I did. So I'll use the dimension C
Yeah.
just at the end of the phrase. I would also use it in the middle of the song. There'd be a phrase that goes like this. So other than just raking the strings to get a lot of kind of a sound like maybe a suspended cymbal or like a whole lot of people playing at the same time, I would rake and bring that dimension C in, and so you get some pitch stuff.
Yeah.
Here's what it sounds like without it. We're just like, okay.
Yeah.
But then when you get this,
I've really appreciated that about your playing, where you would use an effect instead of just letting it stay on the guitar the whole time. Sometimes you would use an effect just for like a rake or something like that. It made that part of the song really stick out.
yeah, thank you. That was sort of my idea.
Yeah.
The other thing, I use this guitar a lot on running, which had sort of a Buddy Holly kind of melody section in it. It was a So again, I use the dimension C to just
Yeah.
push,
Yeah.
a little bit of the parts there. And I love this part. I'm going to play it slowly, just so you can hear the voicings are really cool. I mean, you never get to hear that, when it's playing at speed, but
Yeah.
I love. That's such a nice voicing.
Great voicing. Yeah.
First Desert Rose Band album that I would have used is, what would you use this for? One Step Forward.
Yeah.
In the middle of the verse, it comes in, and then the solo part is.
Again, you got a little Beatley in there.
Totally.
Yes.
Well, the beginning of it, that's taken from Sloop John B.
Okay,
of the
yes,
Beach Boys.
yes.
So it's like,
Yeah.
and then the back part of it, I'm just following the chords.
Yeah.
And you wouldn't normally hear like a seventh chord so much on a 12 string. That's why it sounds kind of cool. Again, it's a little bit of voice leading. So
Yeah.
this my classical training comes out, in some different ways. 35012, custom made, probably one of a kind,
Yeah. Great sounding instrument.
1988.
So this is a really cool 6-string bass. So I remember seeing this on television. I'm not going to geek out too much on you, but I remember seeing and just thinking how unique looking it was, and it sounded killer. Because that wasn't a common thing at that point in time. So you playing with the Desert Rose Band used that. Then Richard Bennett did it with Guitar Town,
Right.
and then
Steve Earle,
then a year or two later, Hayden Nicholas would do it with Clint Black on Killin' Time.
Right.
And so there were a couple of songs that kind of came out, but this is one of the earliest ones where the 6-string bass was used as a solo instrument instead of just a tic-tac.
Yeah.
And I remember hearing, on the first record, He's Back and I'm Blue. And
Yeah, on the recording, it was a Dan Electro.
Yeah.
This bass is really unusual. The body I found in a New York guitar show, sitting under a table for $40, and it was new old stock, which means it didn't have anything cut out for a bridge or pickups or anything. It was just this body, and I thought, how cool is that? I didn't even really know what it was. I found out that it was a Premier, made by Premier, not the English Strum Company.
Right.
It was an American guitar and amp company. So I bought it and I took it to Joe Glazier and asked him to build a neck for it, not thinking he would design a neck so beautiful like that matches perfectly the body, way cooler than an original neck on this. And of course, he used some really pretty flamed wood too.
Of course he did.
You can see up here where it got discolored from the flood because this was sitting in a case for a couple weeks in water.
Yeah.
Some of the perloid started to come off, but it got glued back on. And then these are Dan Electro pickups and bridge. And so it basically has the same sound as my Dan Electro. And we talked about this vibrato pedal, which you so graciously provided. And this is the sound that I used on He's Back and I'm Blue. Middle position, which gets these in series, gives a fatter sound. So nice and warbly.
Yeah. What's not to like? Yeah.
And I would also use this on One Step Forward, which is the really first #1 record for Desert Rose Band. And I remember loaning my Dan Electro 6-string bass to Jack Daniels to
Okay.
use on a Highway 101 record. And I kind of regretted it. At the time, I was just being the nice guy. But I thought, Paul Worley, why would you take a sound from one of your bands and give it to one of your other bands?
Right.
I should have told him, no, you go buy your own.
Yeah. Go buy your own
Go
damn.
get your own.
Go find one.
So
Because you couldn't hardly find one. I mean, basically, you had Joe Glazer was making some, just a few, here and there, just because he liked them, and that's why he was so adept at doing this.
yeah, he does such a great job. I mean, what a master
I
he
love
is.
the top and the scroll work, and the fact that he did the scroll on the headstock.
Yeah, and
That's-
found matching accordion pearl
Yeah.
for the top. I mean, who does that?
Yeah, Joe Glazer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I recently saw a video clip of the Osborne brothers playing Ruby in 1965 at the Newport Folk Festival, and George Shuffler, famous guitarist, is playing electric bass, and he's using one of these basses, which is so cool.
It's very cool. This is one of your Fender custom shop guitars, but this is a special one, obviously, with the paint job.
Yeah, it is. During the Telecaster's time, I think I mentioned that we, all three of us went to Fender
Right.
to be Fender endorsers. And so, I wanted a guitar that could give me a similar sound to my G&L ASAT. But, I'm always, I'm always trying to innovate to get quieter guitars. So I thought, how about humbucking pickups made out of Telecaster coils, underwound, so they don't get too thick, but they still sound like a Tele, but just not as noisy. And they tried to talk me into having them be stacked pickups, which I don't like the sound of two coils under a string. So I didn't want to do that. I also wanted the visual. If you look at it, you can see what it is.
Yeah.
It tells you what it is. So this is one of my signature guitars. The body, you can't tell because of this paint job. The body is Carina. I was always curious about having a Telecaster in Carina. And I don't think any had done before. So they're
Because
in.
of used in Gibson Flying Vs and all the modern, series.
Exactly that, and they have Carina has a particular sound. It's not too dissimilar from mahogany, but it's a type of mahogany anyway, right? So it's Carina body. It has a very flamey neck of bird's eye maple, which in hindsight I probably wouldn't have a lot of flamey necks built anymore because in different lighting, they can trick your eyes as to what fret you're on. A plain neck is probably better. And I can understand why Danny Gatton had the cubic zirconium put in there.
Yeah.
Because again, under lighting, not only do you see it, but you kind of feel it too.
Right.
So that can be helpful. I mean, some players don't move around the neck as much, but I do. He did definitely.
Yeah.
And I do. I know it's because of learning Django style. I like to move up and down a lot. So this guitar, in this position, you have both of these coils, as they say, underwound, and they humbuck each other. Same thing for this position. Both of these coils humbuck each other.
Mm-hmm.
Then this position, you have the two outside coils.
Okay.
This position, you have all four. And in this position, you have the two inside coils.
All right.
So it's a pretty versatile guitar. I wasn't planning on those extra sounds, but the designers, Fred Stewart and Gene Baker, were the builders that worked on this with me in the Fender Custom Shop at the time. And then at that time, I was also playing with Elton John, and Goodbye Old Brick Road was one of my favorite of his albums, and it was one of my favorite things that we played on stage. Funeral for a Friend, which was from that album. A lot of guitar parts on that album. And so I had this done. And you can see, can you read that right there?
I can barely read it.
Yeah, I think it says.
Dan Lawrence?
Yes. Dan Lawrence, 98. Dan
Okay.
Lawrence is the airbrush artist that did this.
Okay.
And it's an amazing paint job.
It is.
And the other thing that's amazing is this guitar went through the flood in Nashville 7 years ago. And, you know, the finish was the most unique thing about it.
Yeah.
And the finish survived beautifully. So you can't even tell. But it's a great sounding guitar, very girthy. So I'll go through the different pickup combinations. It has a tone similar to the G&L ASAT, maybe a little fatter. And then this combination, this is a little bit stratty. This position is nice, smooth for rhythm. This position, you get these two coils very far apart. It's very kind of Jaguar-esque. So good for funky rhythm. And good for surfy kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And then the neck is very full. You know, I could play jazz on it if you want. So this is my signature guitar. I play a guitar like this most often, not always this special finish one, but they came, the normal finishes were champagne sparkle, silver sparkle, and black with gold sparkle binding and pickguard.
Yeah. The perloid binding on that is really neat. And then the fact that they airbrushed over the control plate and it just looks, that is a strike over the top.
Yeah.
Wow.
Spectacular. And the pickguard as well. And the one other thing is the painting goes over the side of the guitar.
Oh my goodness, it's on the back too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, this guy was a great artist. He had done also a Captain Fantastic Strat, I think, for a friend of mine.
Yeah.
And I saw that, and I saw his work on that, and that's what, you know, drove me to do this one.
Got to do it.
So I most often, if I'm playing a telly on stage, it will be this one or one of my other. I have a prototype. A champagne sparkle prototype that's my kind of go-to.
Yeah. So here's another Elton guitar. Tell us about it.
Yeah, this is a 1983 Flying V, and I think it was like called a historic reissue maybe at the time. They did a batch of these, I think some Moderns and some Explorers. And they had been building these models, but not to the original specs for a while. So this kind of went back to the original specs with this kind of plate and all the little features. So this guitar was hanging up in a shop called Black Market Music on La Cienega in Los Angeles. And I lived in West Hollywood at the time, and I would drive on that street often. And I'd see this hanging up in the window. And it always reminded me of the Kinks, you know?
Yeah.
And I'd never had a Flying V, and I just thought how cool that is. And the day that I left for my first rehearsal and tour with Elton John, they sent a car for me, as they did in those days, to take me to the airport. And on the way, I just said, driver, stop right here. And so we stopped at the guitar shop, and I just went in and I just bought it. I didn't haggle. I didn't try to get a price. I didn't trade anything. I was like, I'm going to go play with the ultimate 70s rock star. I'm going to have the ultimate 70s rock guitar.
That's right.
So I got this, and I didn't know at the time. Now these are Tim Shaw humbuckers, so there's kind of a deal on their own. And of course, this is Karina. Again, it went through the flood. You can see a little bit of damage there and a little bit of finish loss here. And you can see some, cracking the finish there.
Right.
But still, not bad.
Pretty unscathed. I mean, relatively.
Yeah, you would never know if I hadn't brought that up. So I ended up using this for slide and also for some tunings, songs with tunings like Bitches Back. And I tune it open G, and then the two bottom strings are the same. And gives a nice... And that's, you can hear reverb from the reverb pedal, but otherwise any kind of overdrive or distortion is just this guitar driving the Matchless JJ30 amp on about 1.
Yeah. Yeah, we've got it pretty low.
Yeah. So
Let's talk about Matchless, for a second, because I don't think some people might be aware that, of course, you had a signature model amp that Matchless made.
Yeah.
But a lot of people don't realize how much you were involved with Mark Sampson in the early days. You told me stories about how you had AC30s that you were touring with, at the Desert Rose Band, and they were falling apart. And they weren't falling apart, but they were having problems.
they were falling apart.
And you were contacting Mark Sampson, and he was like walking you through how to repair them on the phone.
Well, yeah, that's absolutely true. I mean, at the beginning, when Desert Rose Band started touring, I had 4 AC30s to try to keep 2 working at any given time. And that's not because they were poorly built or anything like that. They were just old, and they weren't used to being on a bus vibrating and stuff. One show at the bottom line, I remember turning on my amps. One didn't come on. I looked in the back. The transformer was dangling by the wires. It had just vibrated loose.
Right.
So I had those kind of things all the time. When I first became aware of Mark because I was buying parts at a shop on Sunset Boulevard in Hollywood, and I kept bugging the guy for more and more Vox parts. And finally he said, look, here's the guy that I get all this stuff from. He's in Iowa. So he gave me Mark's number.
Okay.
So I contacted Mark and I bought a couple things from him. And then I started asking him about repairs. And he said, yeah, well, send me your amps. And I said, I don't want to do that. I said, what if I bought you a plane ticket and you came out here? And so I did. He came out and he stayed at my apartment and he fixed my amps and he brought out some stuff to trade and whatever. And so we just became friends, and I kept saying, I think the AC30 thing, people are going to start playing it more and more. Because in LA at the time, not that many people, like maybe Tom Petty, Edge, Bryan Adams, maybe, just a few people. He said, but I think it's going to get bigger. So, to shorten the story, eventually he did move out to California. And it was not that easy because he had a family and stuff. And, cost of living is quite different, Iowa to California. Yes. But he came out and he was, pretty quickly, everybody in the know wanted him repairing their amps. Mm-hmm. And his customers were like Michael Landau and, stuff like that. Yeah. Jack Joseph Puig used him a lot, and Albie Galutin. Anybody who had vintage studio gear or amps was onto him. Well, I kept asking him at the time, couldn't you build me an amp that sounds like an AC30 but it's not old, like a new one, but don't change the sound, don't change the specs, just build it strong. Well, he thought about it. Well, finally, he hooked up with a guy named Rick Parada. And Rick was a very organized guy. Mark is not organized, but just kind of geniusy with sound and tubes and all that. Mm-hmm. And he said, we're going to do it. He said, I've taken apart a transformer. I'm going to have them remanufactured, to count the wines, the insulation, all this stuff. And if, what do you want on the amp? And I said, well, got to have the top boost channel, an AC30. And I would like a phase switch on the back, because when I was doing stereo, miking in the studio, I'd always have to switch the wires and test the phase. It'd be nice to just have a switch. Yep. I'd like 2 outlets on the back, so if I have stuff to plug in. I would like a half power switch to make it like an AC15, drop out 2 of the power tubes. And he said, what about a master volume? I said, no, I hate master volume. He said, but I have to have that on for marketing. I said, well, okay, well, if you do, then have it be able to get out of the circuit, like put a push-pull switch or something on it. Okay. And he said, what about the second channel? I said, what about, would you like a Princeton or like a Fender? I said, no, I hate Fender stuff. Don't. I said, I don't care, whatever you want. He said, maybe an AC15 channel. They have a different tube and it might be cool. I said, okay, whatever, I don't care. Yeah. Just as long as you have the toughest channel and the other, I'm cool. So that's what he built, and that one became the DC30. Yeah.
So those were your specs.
Basically, yeah, basically. So he sent the first one out with me on tour with Desert Rose Band, and he traveled with sometimes as a tech too. But he sent it out and worked great. He knew what to design out because he'd repaired so many amps, so he knew. And he built it. It was fantastic. And of course, they sent one to a shootout at Guitar Player magazine. It won. People went crazy. And, Matchless just, his business went nuts from there on. Right. And he's developed a couple other models. And, one was the SC30, single 12. Another one was an 80-watt, kind of like an AC100. Mm-hmm. Great sounding amp. I had that for a little while. And then Michael Landau took it and tried it and wouldn't return it. He loved it that much. But long story short, so Matchless became very successful, and I had kind of gradually moved to the SC30 single 12 model, and so we were going on. Mark and I were friends, and he said, we should do a signature model amp. I said, but I want everything I wanted, I told you in the DC30. Yeah. He said, but now you use the single 12. I go, yeah. I said, well, is there anything? Oh, and also in the Roger McGuinn doing that album, I never plugged into that second channel. I just ignored it. Mm-hmm. Well, one day I just said, let me just try this. And I went, oh my God, that's the best sounding thing I ever heard in my life. And from then on, I never plugged into the first channel anymore. Wow. I love that EF86 too, sound and single 12 and all that. So that was what I was using all the time. I said, well, if we do a signature amp, let's do it that channel, but I'd love to have reverb and tremolo on board, in the single 12. So, and I said, and I love the old look of the custom amps, the sparkly ones. So let's do a single 12, the second channel, add tremolo and reverb, and cover it in a sparkle. What color? I said, oh, blue or gray or white or some combination of those. What about red? No, I don't like that. Gold? No, just those. Okay. He said, it's going to be really expensive. I said, I don't care. You know, it doesn't matter to me if
Yeah.
you know, if you're okay to build them. So he did, and it was released at the NAMM show 1997. He said, people don't care how much it is, they're ordering it anyway. So that became the signature model amp. They weren't supposed to build it in any other colors besides blue, white, or gray. They ended up building some in red and some in gold, which I've seen. And then not long after that, that same year, because of growing pains of big companies, Mark had to sell controlling interest to another party. This guy was a lawyer. And he then locked Mark out of the company and decided that he would just let it go bankrupt and wait 2 years and then restart it. So not paying Celestion, not paying the transformer manufacturers, not paying me for royalties on the amps.
Yeah.
You know, to me that was so unconscious and not looking at the bigger picture that it's a small world, this musical family, and people are going to know that. And so to just start up again without the guy that, you know, created this company and with ill will from people like me and
your suppliers.
yeah, exactly. So that's why now I would rarely use these amps live. I don't want to promote them. I mean, I'm proud of my amps, and my old Matchless sound amazing. They're great amps, and they've been through the flood and still underwater for a week, and they still work. Amazing. But, you know, if you're looking for Matchlesses, go find some Samson era Matchlesses.
Yeah.
And they're going to have the spirit and the energy of the guy who designed them, not the spirit and the energy of the guy who took the company bankrupt.
Well said. So now to cover kind of your Django era, we've got one of your signature models.
Yeah, this is a copy of a Selmer guitar that was you know, Selmers were made in the from 1930 to 1953 about, and that's what Django played.
Yeah.
This one is a black and white. We call it the tuxedo model. I joined forces with Saga early on. It's been quite a number of years now, but they figured out how to build these guitars really well. So I've got 3 signature models with them. One that's more traditional colored than this one, and then one that has the big D sound hole, which is a little bit different. But they're great guitars. You can hear how it sounds. They have a very kind of tight and projecting sound.
So, and part of that is due to the longer scale of it, and then the fact that the kind of the interesting strings that are used for it, and then the inner like baffling of the body and such.
Well, this doesn't have any inner baffling. I use a
Right.
little bit of foam here that helps the body not create a resonant low tone. But yeah, the strings are unusual strings because they have a steel core, like a steel string, but the winding is silver-plated copper, like a classical string.
Okay.
So that's why they have a sound kind of in between a steel string and classical. You use a very heavy pick. You see, this is probably 4 millimeters thick.
Oh my
With a
goodness.
bevel on the edge. And yeah, the body has a little bit of a dome right here. It's not a big arch, but it's the top is kind of glued to braces that have a little bit of an arch. So it's almost like this is a speaker dome, and the bridge kind of the bridge sets that top and the body in motion. And you play it pretty hard back here by the bridge. You don't want to play up here because that's a terrible sound.
is a Blueridge guitar that you use in your J2 B2, in your bluegrass group.
Right. Saga is the parent company, the same one that builds the Gitane guitars. And we talked for a number of years about doing something with their Blueridge line. I really like their guitars a lot. So this is, again, a signature model. You'll see some matching elements to some of my other models with this kind of Dalmatian tortoiseshell, they call it. This guitar has an extra large sound hole like Tony Rice's that was Clarence White's. It doesn't look like it because the fingerboard doesn't overhang.
Okay.
The top is made of Port Orford cedar. It's a slow-growing cedar. Usually cedar is pretty fast-growing and is used for tops on flamencos, sometimes other guitars, and it has a very warm sound. And spruce, of course, is a harder, slower-growing wood, and it has a more of a dry and bright sound. So this is kind of in between both. It's got the warmth of a cedar, but it's a slow-growing cedar, so it's not too soft.
Oh.
So the back and sides are Brazilian rosewood, and it sounds like this. Big, full bluegrass sound. I love it. It sounds great plugged in. Sounds great on a mic. And of course, it has the rose on here. It's kind of a little nod to the Desert Rose Band. And so this is my Blueridge signature model.
Very nice. Well, John.
Boom.
Yeah, I really appreciate you coming out today.
Hey,
This
it's
is
my
a
pleasure.
really special treat.
It's
So-
just my pleasure because I know you know, and so it's fun to tell about stuff that you might actually give a shit about and be interested and know some of the details. So, because I carry around a lot of this stuff in my mind, and most people are like, my wife's like, guitars again, strings, blah blah blah. So boring. So,
Not to us.
good.
Right. Thank you.
You're welcome.